Remember that time your parents grounded you and made you miss that event you wanted to go to? If you thought you had it bad, then just maybe you'll feel better after hearing our worst 10 parents of all time. In 2012, superficial and surgery-obsessed mother Sarah Burge bought her daughter Little Poppy Burge a 7,000-pound, or roughly $11,000, voucher for liposuction on her 7th birthday. Sarah defends her gifts by claiming Poppy asks for surgery all the time, undoubtedly due to the constant influence of her mother, who has spent more than 500,000 pounds on her own body. Furthermore, Sarah views the vouchers as an investment in her future, like saving money for her education. Sadly, this award-winning mother has also made headlines once before, when in 2010 she confessed to teaching her daughter to pole dance after giving her yet another voucher, this one for breast implants. Not really sure what sort of future she's investing in, but she should probably learn how to count singles before she's 18. Charlie Wilcox, a young mother who thought she could, quote, strengthen her unborn daughter's lungs by smoking 3,500 cigarettes while pregnant, did just that. Her child Lily made it through, but not healthy as can be, weighing in at just 6 pounds 2 ounces at birth, more than a pound less than her national average of 7 pounds 4 ounces, as well as 10 days premature. Midwives tested Miss Wilcox's monoxide levels during her pregnancy and found them to be over 6 times higher than the considered safe level for a baby. Despite all of this, Charlie would go on to ask, quote, where's the proof that it's so bad to smoke? This is obviously a major case of classic denial, as no parent would like to admit that harm had been done to their child because of the choices they made as a parent who, and I quote, just wasn't ready to give up smoking. British mother Carrie Campbell told Good Morning America that she administers Botox shots to her young daughter Brittany to help her reduce the wrinkles in her face and gain a competitive edge in child beauty pageants. During the interview, poor Brittany would go on to say, it hurts sometimes. It makes me nervous, but I get used to it. Willingly inflicting pain to your child for something as superficial as beauty pageants. Mother Carrie states that it's alright though, as lots of moms there give their kids Botox. It's pretty much like The Thing. Instead of playing and having fun, she's being poked with needles and having her legs waxed. Yeah, you heard that right. Sadly, this hasn't just inflicted physical pain on the child with potential risks to her skin. It's robbing her of her childhood and teaching her to judge upon appearance. In 2011, the parents of an unnamed young teenage girl were arrested after making a deal with a used car salesman, 67-year-old Robert Bairden, to trade sex with their then 14-year-old daughter to pay off the remainder of their minivan. Her mother, 37-year-old Sandra Davis, received only 8 years in prison with 12 years of probation, as she told the court she didn't physically abuse her daughter, but admittedly had encouraged her to make the deal. However, father, 39-year-old James Davis, as well as Robert, were sentenced to 10 years in prison and 10 years probation. It makes me personally sick to my stomach, Captain Tony Winborn said after the daughter confessed that her parents made her do sexual favors so they could avoid the $281 a month payment. Captain Winborn also goes on record saying, the only thing I can tell you is there were drugs involved in this family, and it was some very sick, perverted stuff going on amongst the entire family. I mean, why pay your bills when you can pimp out your only daughter, ruin her life, and still find the time to get high? South Korean couple Kim Jae-byam and wife Kim Yoon-jeong neglected their 3-month-old daughter Sarang to the point of death from starvation. In a disgusting twist of irony, the addiction which tore them from the parental care their little Sarang needed was a video game, in which they were raising a virtual child. In 2009, the couple was arrested for their daughter's death, this being the first known death due to gaming addiction. Police say the parents had lost their wills to live, as they had both lost their jobs, and their daughter was born small and premature. Detective Sang Yoon Han gave a one-word description description of the scene: terrible. Sarong weighed a mere 5.5 pounds when they found her covered with a blanket in her crib in the middle of a filthy room. The two vile, worthless parents would feed her spoiled milk, when she was fed at all. Probably the most despicable part of all of this is they showed no remorse at all. They took the time to search for funeral arrangements online before they called the authorities to report her death. Back in 2012, Jodi Rock was arrested after she admitted to burning her then 15-month-old son's genitals with a hair straightener. In the 3-page affidavit, Jodi tells investigators that she touched her hand to the iron to check if it was hot, and then closed the iron clamps across her son's genitals. The child suffering 3 burns starting on the inside of his right thigh, spanning across his testicles, and pinches the left inner thigh. As if the act wasn't disturbing enough, she tried to tell police officers that it was her boyfriend and others in the house before she would finally confess. Sadly, medical examiners would come to find a number of other injuries on the child, including several fractures which would never allow the child's bones to properly set, to an obvious deformity on his shoulder. The child's eyes were described as glassy and withdrawn, in which it was visibly obvious that the child was in great agony. Florida, 2010. A young woman by the name Alexandra Tobiah, then 22 years old, pleaded guilty to the second-degree murder of her 3-month-old son after his crying kept her from playing Farmville. Alexandra told investigators that she had shaken the baby, smoked a cigarette to compose herself, before shaking him once more. She also said it is possible that her son may have hit his head during the event. Even more appalling is that she tried to blame game developer Zynga for having an addiction that led to her rage-fueled outburst that would claim the life of her child. The worst part about this, the case got dissected apart from being a case against video games. Instead of focusing on the unfit parent whose lack of self-control led to the death of her defenseless child, Circuit Judge Adrian G. Soud would have no excuses as he sentenced Alexandra to 50 years in prison. He would have this to say about it: "He who is the most defenseless among us was murdered by his own mommy. And why? Because he was crying during a game of Fishville or Farmville or whatever was going on during Facebooking time that day." Josh Powell, the man who had a wife gone missing in 2009, would go on to murder his 2 young sons with hatchet blows to the back of their heads, before causing an explosion which would claim the life of all 3. Just days after a judge had ruled against him in a child custody hearing, a social worker would bring the 2 boys to Mr. Powell's home in Graham, Washington, for a routine supervised visit. Upon arrival, Powell had his sons enter the house, but would forcefully block the social worker from entering. The social worker called her supervisor to report the smell of gas in the home, but mere moments later, the home would engulf itself in flame. This being a final act of a desperate, loathsome, and disgusting man, after his children began to verbalize more. As the oldest boy began talking about the camping trip, in which mommy was in the trunk, mom and dad got out of the car and mom disappeared. Authorities would comment stating they found the grim remains belonging to Josh Powell, and that of his 2 children, 7-year-old Charles and 5-year-old Braden. A wretched and callous dredge of a woman, and a mother of 4-year-old Daniel, Magdalena Luxak, and her partner Marius Krasolik were called heartless monsters during the horrific 9-week trial at Birmingham Crown Court. The judge said to them about their torment, abuse, and torture of their beautiful, bright-eyed little boy, that for reasons which are unfathomable, Daniel became a target for derision, abuse, and systematic cruelty, designed to cause him significant mental and physical suffering, in which the scale of his suffering was truly horrific, sentencing them both to a minimum of 30 years in jail for the treatment of the child. The beatings had gotten so severe that at one point the couple had Google searched patient in coma among other things, suggesting the child had been beaten, subjected to attempted drowning, and poisoned with salt during his final hours of life. Joseph Fritzl lived on a busy street in a small town with his wife Rosemary and 6 of their 7 children. Claimed that his daughter Elizabeth had run away to join a sect, leaving a goodbye letter behind. In reality, Joseph Fritzl asked his daughter Elizabeth on August 28, 1984, to help him carry a door down into the basement. Upon arriving in the basement, he attacked and raped his daughter, then handcuffed her to a column, locked in the basement where she would remain for 24 years. During this time, he would continue to rape her, and during those 24 years would impregnate her 7 times. She testifies that he would rape her in front of her children constantly, and goes to say she can't recall how many times he had raped her. When he decided his dungeon was getting overcrowded, he forced Elizabeth to write a note stating that she left her children on his doorstep so that he may adopt them and move them to the upper level of the house with his real family. Detective Manfred Wolfart, while reading this new letter and comparing the writing to her old goodbye letter, would reach the conclusion that the letters were oddly smooth, constructed, and not very authentic. The tragic tale of Elizabeth Fritzl is one so vile, so unimaginable, that it's just incomprehensible, even in today's desensitized internet age, where any monstrous act of humanity is one click away.